Hey guys, so just a quick rice field update first of all. As you can see, it's grown a bit since the last video in the rice field. In some fields the grains are actually starting to appear on the top. As it gets longer it sways more in the wind, which gives it that beautiful ocean effect as the wind blows across it. So it's about 6:15 at night, sun's still blazing away over there. It was 37 degrees today and it's not much less at the moment. It's still pretty hot and about 50% humidity, so it's pretty intense. Makes everything grow really well, but it melts the humans. So anyway, that's the weather and rice field update. The topic of the video, because we made a video recently and spoke about the people getting in your personal space in Japan, and during that video I mentioned briefly about how people don't make eye contact often, and again, always exceptions. Every video we make, there's always exceptions, of course, right? But generally in those situations where people are all really packed together, usually they don't make eye contact, and that's sort of how people sort of feel more comfortable with it. So they're not making eye contact. All it is a bunch of bodies in a confined space. So that is relevant. As mentioned in that video, it probably deserves its own video. That's this one. So that's how it happens. So yeah, don't make eye contact. So it's just their way of giving you privacy is to not make eye contact. And it's pretty funny actually, because what will happen is you'll be in a shopping center or a supermarket or somewhere and you'll be walking around and everybody's just, they sort of look straight ahead and look at what they're looking at and just avoid the people, right? But they do see everybody, of course, right? So you get these funny circumstances happen where I'll see somebody that I know and they'll be getting slowly closer. And I know they've seen me. They're not making eye contact with me, but I know they've seen me. And as they get closer, you'll say, hello, konnichiwa, hi gozaimasu, and they'll, and they'll pretend to be really surprised. And this is another example of those social circumstances in Japan where people pretend, and they pretend to behave in the appropriate way. And of course, because they're pretending that they hadn't been looking at you, then when you say hello, they have to pretend to be surprised that you're there. And even though, you'll get really obvious circumstances here where you're walking towards someone for a really long time till they get really close. And then you'll say hello, and they you're here. Really surprised. Oh, bikurishita, they'll say. Bikurishita. Oh, I'm surprised, right? And they're not surprised. They're just acting surprised. And it's because that's the polite thing to do, because eyeballing or looking at people or staring's usually not good either, but looking at people is just something they don't do here. It's sort of respect for the other people is you don't look at them and you don't make eye contact with them. It's sort of respecting their privacy. Even though you're all in a public space, reasonably close together, you just don't look at them. And that sort of respects their privacy by not looking at them, right? Which is a funny one. I mentioned staring there briefly. Staring's another one, of course, pretty impolite in most cultures, really. But with the exception of young people and really old people, they're the two. You'll get little kids when you're a foreigner. You'll get little kids staring at you. And you'll get old people staring at you, because the old people might not have seen a foreigner up close before, and the kids too. So the little kids and old people will stare, but everybody else, usually you'll just pretend you're not there. Incidentally too, I'll just mention while we're on that topic, this isn't, what I'm talking about here and in the last video, this isn't anything to do with being a foreigner. Some people say sometimes, oh, maybe it'd be different if you weren't a foreigner. It's not, because you can see the same thing happening with Japanese people. So, you're sitting back somewhere and you'll see two Japanese people walking towards each other with their shopping trolleys, and then right at the last moment, bikurishita, I'm surprised, how are you, right? And they saw each other. What that's doing too, it's giving the other person the opportunity to keep walking past without saying anything, right? It's weird. A lot of game playing goes on here, as you might have noticed in previous videos. Just some other extensions on this that we believe, there's been a bit of discussion about that this week, about this topic, and different things were thrown forward, including things like masks and smartphones, and the smartphones in particular. You'll see people walking around here with their smartphone. They'll walk into a restaurant and the staff will say, how many people? And they'll say 3, and they'll walk across the restaurant staring at their smartphone. and then they'll sit down at their table and they'll stare at their smartphone. And it seems that that's a really good excuse to avoid eye contact with other people, right? Everybody in the restaurant, because they know when they're walking through the restaurant, people in the restaurant will be noticing them. So they stare at their smartphone as they walk through the restaurant, and this is super common. We see it all the time. And of course, the other one is on trains and buses and waiting for trains and buses. So at the train station, everybody waiting for the train, all staring at their smartphones. And, you know, I love looking over people's shoulders just to see what they're doing, because usually they're just doing nothing. They're opening an app and closing an app and opening another app and closing another app, and they're just doing anything that they could possibly do other than look around themselves, right? And they'll do that at the train station. Everybody except me will be sitting there staring at their smartphones and opening apps and closing apps and just sort of doing nothing. And then they get on the train to do the same thing. And of course, you know, the perfect way to avoid eye contact, isn't it? If you're sitting there staring at your phone. And they all do it. We've shown you that before in previous videos. Everybody in sight staring at their phone. And for sure some people are actually watching videos or sending emails or doing something, but the majority, I suspect, you know, and if you watch the way they're handling their phone, quite often you can see they're just pushing it, touching it, opening, closing, they're not really doing anything, you know, but they're avoiding that eye contact. And walking through shopping centres, they'll do it too. So no doubt some people are actually doing something, but I suspect, we talked about it this week, you know, that it's a good excuse. Similar to the whole mask thing too. You know, they love the mask thing, as we've shown you, and, you know, the mask's up to here and the hat's down to here, and they're sort of walking around the shopping centre and not looking at anybody. You know, it's all sort of connected. Now, further on that, we've got a video coming about window tint and curtains in cars. And of course, with this sort of climate, you know, tints and curtains are really good. But what you'll see is, you know, they'll be driving around at night. They've actually got curtains on their cars. We're going to show you soon. Curtains on the windows, driver's window and passenger's window, and they'll actually have the curtains almost all the way closed, right? And they'll do it at night on both sides, right? So it's not for the sun, you know, and so they pull up at the traffic lights and, you know, nobody can see them. Scary, isn't it? Scary, isn't it? The driver can't see out the window either, but they love the curtains. They love the tint, dark tint, really, really dark tint. We've got that video coming to show you. But you know, actually on the traffic light thing too, there's a real thing here. If you're sitting in a traffic light and another car pulls up, usually they'll pull up just a little bit behind you so that you can't look across and see them. Most of them do that. So you're sitting in a set of traffic lights, a car pulls up beside you, you look across and you're just seeing the front of the car. You're not actually seeing the driver and the passenger because they've stopped just behind you a bit. They do that all the time on purpose. And again, see, part of it is they don't want you looking at them, and the other part of it is out of sort of giving you distance so that, you know, you don't feel like they're intruding on you or something. I don't know. That's just what they do. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It is a bit funny. Now, you know, it's hard not to have stereotypes and things like that, but in some of the cultures that we come from, and in old Japanese culture, when you see anybody coming towards you, usually, you know, you greet them and they greet you, and you look at each other and, you know, good morning. Here, and we talked about before, lots of people actually won't greet. They'll just walk past with their head down and not look at you and just walk past and not say anything. And again, they do it to each other. But even if they do greet you, usually they won't look at you. They'll have their head down and they walk past and you go, "Hi, Zomas," and they go, "Hi, Zomas," and they just keep their head down and don't look at you. And again, not making eye contact. Which, without wanting to sort of stereotype or anything like that, you know, as a man, usually when you say hello to another man, I mean, people in general, right? Usually when you greet someone, they look you in the eye, don't they? But they, you know, most of them won't here. And again, there are exceptions. There are exceptions to this. Some people look you straight in the eye and go, "Oh, guys, almost," you know. Some of them will. But the majority will just sort of avoid eye contact and Hozomas and walk past. You know, likewise in restaurants and train stations and things like that, you can sit there, and because as a person who studies the society and the culture, you know, I do tend to watch what people are doing a bit, because, you know, that's my thing, that's what I'm interested in. And so I'll be sitting there watching what everybody's doing. And I could be looking at the people at the next table that are almost within touching distance, and they just won't look. And I could be sitting there for an hour and watching what they're doing, and they just won't look. They just won't look. probably out of the corner of their eye, they're probably looking, but they won't look and they won't give you, won't make eye contact with you. So it's just their thing. It's just their thing. So it sort of makes sense, doesn't it? Because that personal space thing that we talked about, you know, if you're going to be living with lots of people and being in small spaces with lots of people, it is a sort of a good way to give yourself privacy and to give the other people privacy by just doing your own thing, and they're all doing their own thing, and nobody's looking at each other, and no one's talking to each other, and generally, I mean, we're at the countryside. It can be different here, and in the city. And in the city, you can come across someone in the city that suddenly goes, "Oh, hello," you know, and starts talking to you. It does happen, but the majority of people everywhere, whether it be the city or the country, usually just, you know, prefer just to keep their head down or look at something else, be interested in something else. Probably the funniest one is that pretending to be surprised thing. That's a funny one. That's a really funny. Oh, Bickerty Star. Yeah, I'm surprised. No, you're not. You know, you knew I was here. You saw me 20. Actually, the funny one just came to mind at a restaurant. Some people we knew were sitting at another table not far away, and because we know people who, if they were there, would sort of wave, you know. But these guys sat there and had dinner. We sat at our table and had dinner, and they pretended they hadn't seen us. And then as we got up to leave, we walked past them and hello, and they all went, "Oh, Bickerty Star," you know. Yeah, no, you're not. You're not surprised. You knew. Oh, so the sun's finally setting and it's finally gone behind a cloud. I'm going to show you in a minute. It's quite beautiful. So anyway, that's that topic, not making eye contact. So I will put it on the how-to playlist because the heads up is, keep this in mind, that Japanese people usually aren't used to people staring at them. So even though I spend a lot of time studying what the people around me are doing, because that's what I'm interested in, you have to be pretty discreet about it. You can't look like you're doing that, because obviously they're not used to that. So if you sit and stare at people and they see you staring at them, it's going to make them really uncomfortable. Of course, probably would be the same anywhere, wouldn't it? So it's a bit of a heads up, you know. Understand people don't make eye contact. Often I won't either, you know. If I'm walking down the street, someone walks past and hi, Zomas, there's no need to eyeball them, you know. Interesting too, just a small extension on that. People will, when they're walking down the street, usually they don't look at other people's houses. You know that in some of our cultures, when you're walking down the street, it's quite normal. That's a nice house, and look at his garden. And usually they won't. They sort of walk looking straight ahead like that. And I've had people walk past that I know that I've been waiting for them to look over so I can greet them, and they just don't look. They just got head down like this, and past they go. That's just a thing. So we have to do the same thing a bit ourselves. Otherwise, we're going to come across as a bit rude and a bit in their face if we're staring at them. Hello, you know, a bit too much. So we have to be, when you're having conversations here, for some of us it's natural to look people in the eye, but you'll find if you do it too much, it makes them uncomfortable and they'll look away. So it's often best to do that ourselves. If we're having a conversation with someone, you know, look them in the eye a bit and then look away a bit and look them in the eye a bit, just to sort of take it easy on them. Otherwise, if you're really eyeballing them as you're talking to them, it could freak them out. And because we're often, depending on who you're talking to, as a foreigner, it can be quite intimidating for some of them too. So it depends. It really depends. I mean, you know, these things are all generalisations, so it depends who you're talking to. But if you get that feeling talking to someone here that they keep looking away, then it's probably better just to give them a bit of space and not eyeball them too much while you're talking to them, because you might be freaking them out if they're not used to it, you know. So anyway, that was that. That's an odd subject. So I'll give you a look at this before we go, because it's actually quite nice. The sun's going down, it's sort of behind some clouds. Oof. Anyway, that's enough of that. Please enjoy this. More videos coming soon.